Sí, por favor. Más fácil, que esto es muy grande para... Vénganse más para acá, por favor. La fila de resistencia, hemos ubicado aquí la fila de la resistencia. La fila de la resistencia, logramos que se moviera la fila de la resistencia, gracias. Bueno, buenas tardes, gracias. Buenas tardes, qué bueno que están aquí. Voy a empezar a hablar en español para el proceso de integración y entrar en calor. Pero tenemos un momento, estamos aquí en un momento muy interesante, ¿verdad? Que es para la presentación de Chandra Talpade Mojante y Linda Carty y sus trabajos en un website y en un archivo digital que se llaman Feminist Women Warriors. ¿De verdad? Espérate. Feminist Freedom Warriors. I knew I was doing it wrong. Feminist Freedom Warriors, Genealogies, Justice, Politics, and Hope. Edited by Chandra Talpade Mohanty y Linda Carty. Un libro muy interesante de feminismo global y además de estudios transdisciplinarios. Y esto es así porque, como todos nosotros sabemos, ¿verdad? Y lo vivimos, la especialización disciplinaria para muchos de nosotros no es opcional. No es opcional porque los académicos que estamos trabajando de manera comprometida con el desarrollo de nuevas áreas de estudio y de nuevas perspectivas a las mismas áreas de estudio, vivimos, respiramos, leemos y transitamos en espacios transdisciplinarios, multidisciplinarios. No es posible, ¿verdad?, trabajar y especializarse en una sola cosa, si no podemos crear el contexto donde eso ocurre, que tiende a ser un contexto de muchas acciones y de muchas prácticas solapadas que se conectan. Así que en conexión con la Facultad de Estudios Generales, el programa de diversificación académica en estudios de afrodescendencia y racialización, quería aprovechar este conjunto, este congreso para compartir con ustedes los proyectos de Chandra Talpade Mohanty y Linda Carty. Okay, I did my part in Spanish. El resto de la cosa va a ser en inglés. ¿No hay problema? No, ¿verdad? Nosotros hacemos lo que podemos. Nosotros somos así, bailamos en un código y el otro. Todos son lenguajes coloniales, así que lo único que podemos hacer es transformarlos lo más que podamos. Y para la globalización tenemos que hablar la mayor cantidad de lenguajes posibles y podemos meterle también el raizal, el palenquero, el cafre boricua, el spanglish y hablar en lenguas que a veces funciona, pues lo hacemos. So I will read the biographies of our distinguished speakers. And I would like to introduce Linda Carty. She's a sociologist and a Black feminist scholar, activist, and educator in the African American Studies Department at Syracuse University. Linda's activist and research work spans Black labor struggles, migration, and sexuality in Canada, the Caribbean, and the U.S. She's the author of A Genealogy of Marxist Feminism in Canada, Not a Nanny. Eso le va a hablar directamente a Yvonne Denis, que estaba por ahí, la autora de uno de los cuentos nana de leche, que a mí más me han gustado sobre la faz de la tierra. Not a Nanny, a gender transnational analysis of Caribbean domestic workers in New York City. The discourse of empire and social construction of gender. And Linda is editor of the anthology And Still We Rise, Feminist Mobilization in Contemporary Canada, and she's the co-author, contributor to We Are Rooted Here, Essays of African Canadian Women's History and Unsettling Relations. The University as a Site of Feminist Struggles. Linda has co-authored Mapping Transnational Feminist Engagement, Neoliberalism and the Politics of Solidarity with Chandra Talpa de Mohanty, and Solidarity Work in Transnational Feminism, The Question of Class and Location with Monisha Dasgupta. She worked with UNAIDS Caribbean and has been a member of the Black Women's Collective Toronto, Caribbean Women's Health Association, Immigrant Services, New York City, and is a founding member of the Democratizing Knowledge Collective at Syracuse University. As an educator, Linda continues her grounded community activism in the Eastern Caribbean. She's based in St. Kitts, where she works with women and youth who have a desire to create structural change on both state and community levels. The focus of this work is addressing a range of social ills, from gender-based violence to the COVID pandemic. And she is the founder of the organization Gender Central, through which the project of community workshops has been launched. Chandra Talpa de Mohanty is a feminist scholar, activist, and educator in the Women's and Gender Studies Department at Syracuse University also. Chandra's activism, scholarship, and teaching focus on transnational feminist theory, anti-capitalist feminist praxis, anti-racist education, and the politics of knowledge. She is the author of Feminism Without Borders, Decolonizing Theory and Practicing Solidarity, and co-editor of 4 volumes, including Third World Women and the Politics of Feminism, Feminist Genealogies, Colonial Legacies and Democratic Futures. Her writing has been translated into, chequense esto, Arabic, German, Dutch, French, Italian, Spanish, Farsi, Chinese, Russian, Swedish, Thai, Korean, Turkish, Slovenian, Hindi, Czech, Slovakian, Armenian, Greek, Portuguese, and Japanese. Algún día yo quisiera que mis cosas estuvieran traducidas a tantos idiomas. She is series editor of Comparative Feminist Studies and was member of the Indigenous Women of Color Solidarity Delegation to Palestine in June 2011. Mohanty is a member of the advisory boards of SIGN, the Journal of Women in Culture and Society Transformations, the Journal of Inclusive Pedagogy and Scholarship, Feminist Africa from South Africa, Asian Women in Korea, Feminist Economics, the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies, Gender and Politics, and Journal of Cultural Anthropology, and serves on the international advisory boards of HEMA, that is a European MA on World Global Studies, and University of Granada in Spain, and the Center of Multidisciplinary Studies on Racism at Uppsala University in Sweden, and the Center of Intersectional Justice in Berlin, Germany, and the Project on Armed Conflict Resolution and People's Rights in India, and the Academy Advisory Council, Jewish Voice for Peace, and the Advisory Circle, Jews Against Anti-Muslim Racism. Linda and Chandra were the co-PIs for the Mellon-founded Democratizing Knowledge Summer Institute, Just Academic Spaces, Crafting New Public Through Radical Literacies. Okay? Así que estamos muy honrados de que Chandra y Linda estén aquí. Yo creo que su práctica es precisamente lo que nosotros estamos discutiendo, de cómo las disciplinas conversan y son necesarias que conversen para poder hacer espacios de integración, crítica y activismo desde la academia a nivel global. Y van a estar presentando el archivo de Feminist Freedom Warriors, Genealogies of Justice, Politics and Hope, aquí con nosotros en este congreso. Mil gracias por estar presente. Thank you so much, and I leave you with Chandra and with Chandra Mohanty and with Linda Carty. Gracias, Min. Thank you.
Okay to sit here. We can do this, right? All right. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Really happy to be here. Wanted to thank Myra and Darian and all of the people that have done incredible amount of work to bring us both here. And we've had 2 days of incredible workshops where we have learned a lot about Puerto Rico, politics, racism, and feminist praxis. So we really appreciate that. Thank you. We're going to begin with very brief remarks on our scholar-activist collaborations. And each of us will say a little bit. Some of you who were there yesterday might find some repetition, but we'll say a little bit about each of our histories and how we come to the project that we're going to present to you today. We met in the late 1980s, in fact, which is now many decades ago, Linda, at the Montreal Feminist Book Fair. And then our paths have crossed in the 1990s. For instance, both of us taught at Oberlin College at different moments. And then we attended a lot of conferences which were key to each of our political intellectual development. Like, for instance, the conference I Am Your Sister, which was on Audre Lorde, which honored Audre Lorde. And then a lot of overlapping Black, South Asian, Caribbean, and women of color communities in the US and Canada have kind of brought us together since the 90s. Since early 2000, we are both at Syracuse University. And in fact, being in the same place led to ongoing and in fact quite ambitious collaborations, which have been facilitated by being in proximity and specifically by a common vision of epistemological praxis, pedagogy, and commitment to radical and gender justice, to racial and gender justice. And we have a history of working, for instance, in the Future of Minority Studies project, which was also Mellon-funded project at Cornell University for about 8 years, in the Democratizing Knowledge project that Myra mentioned, which we were co-founders of at Syracuse University, and now the big project we're working on is the Feminist Freedom Warriors video archive. So the book that Myra held up is in fact one moment, a punctuation in a project that began a few years ago and continues. And it is a project that is archiving, that attempts to provide a counter archive, right? Which is, we think, really important, and it's an archive that can be used for organizing, for curriculum, as a curriculum resource, for classrooms, you know, a whole bunch of different things. Okay, so let me say a few words about myself. I grew up in India. I have a background in the humanities, and I have a PhD in education. As a graduate student, as a postgraduate student, I was part of organizing a global transnational conference in 1983 at the University of Illinois. This was called Common Differences, Third World Women and Feminist Perspectives, right? And that taught me that collaborative work with feminists all over the globe was key to the way I imagined fighting for social justice, right? And imagined reading the way the world works, essentially. And I've worked then collaboratively with feminists in India, in Europe, in South Africa, Colombia, Mexico, Palestine, and so on. And some of that you saw in the long biography that you need not have read so carefully. Anyway, and this collaboration happens both in the academy and in community organizations. I worked for many years and continue to do so with an organization in North Carolina called Grassroots Leadership. This is an organization, a community organization that works around the privatization of prisons and immigrant detention centers. So it's an anti-privatization organization, right? I've also worked with something called the Center for Immigrant Families in New York City, which did political education around school segregation and immigrant rights. I've worked in addition, I'm mentioning these because to me, this genealogy is as significant as the things I have written and the work that I've done in academic settings, right? Because oftentimes what I end up writing comes from my engagement with grassroots struggles on the ground and activists in particular organization. So the theory does not come from libraries or just the academy. I've also worked with Freedom University in Georgia, which is a university that was founded a few years ago for students who were, what are they called? Dreamers, yeah, people who were non-documented, undocumented students who could not have access to public universities in Georgia, right? So I've worked with them for a while. And in fact, Linda and I were able to provide scholarships for some of the students from that university to come to Syracuse and do undergraduate work. And right. So that's one. And then finally, I've also worked with something called the Municipal Services Project, which works on the privatization of public services globally around the world. And it does research and policy and social movement work. So again, it's a left organization that is also feminist, not all of it, but it is. And we work in different parts of the world around the privatization specifically of things like health services, sanitation services, and so on, to work with movements that are struggling on the ground against that. Okay? So that's a little bit of my history. So, Linda.
A little bit of, can you, this is working.
Oh, okay, good.
Good. Hello, happy to be here again. I'm not going to go over some of what Chandra said because you saw the parts of it that spoke to both of us, and we're going to come back to some of that later. I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. I never knew where I fit in the academy. I came to the academy through activist work, street activism. I graduated from the University of Toronto as a sociologist, as Chandra said, and part of my sociology was sociology of education, but the major part before, as an undergraduate and graduate student, was regular straight-laced sociology. And I was involved in union organizing at the university with the teaching assistants. That's how we get funding support in graduate school in Canada, because education in Canada is just about free. But when you get to higher education, like your graduate work to PhD and so on, in most institutions, same thing happens in the US, you get assistantships. And we didn't like the salaries and so on that we were getting, and we mobilized and shut down the school. And when it opened up, things changed and improved. So from that work, I realized that there is activism to be done in the academy. So I was doing activism outside, and I decided I'm going to become an activist inside as well. In the 1980s, and those of you who were there yesterday heard so much about the Black Women's Collective, I'm not going to go through that now. But in the 1980s, 10 black women, young, all young, black women, students, undergraduate and graduate students. We formed this organization, and we were a force to be reckoned with in Toronto, in Canada. And we got a number of things changed, including federal laws around issues of immigration. You know, one thing I didn't say yesterday, I need to say now, is that there was an organization, the Canadian state had organized a scheme, a domestic workers scheme, bringing teachers and nurses, only teachers and nurses, from the Anglophone Caribbean to Canada to be domestic workers. Yeah, to be domestic workers. And those women came, and they had to fill out these immigration forms and say that they are not married and they don't have children. We're talking about the 70s. And they did. And Jamaican women who always had kids, and and some had husbands, but they filled out what the form required. You had to be there 5 years before you could get equivalent of the green card. And when it came time for them to apply, they said, the immigration officer said to them, you don't qualify to apply because you now have kids. We knew you had kids, and in cases of the ones who were married, that you were married. And we said, the Black Women's Collective said, hell no. And we got on the streets. And that changed the immigration law to 1 year. 1 year. And they could leave the job. If they come in and they are with a family as a domestic worker and they don't like the job, they could leave within the year. We managed to change that law, the Black Women's Collective. So that's where I started. My first foray into, what should I say, academic work was at the University of Toronto in the Women and Gender Studies department. And there I did a lot of work, a lot of organizing, changed the curriculum to include Black feminism and other parts of that. Then I got tired of the Canadian scene because I was always told that you're talking about race, race, race. That happens in the US and not here. And I used to use a lot of US literature because we didn't have it in Canada. And so I picked up and left. And I went to Oberlin College, where my friend here was going on a 1-year leave, and I went to fill in that space in sociology, in women's studies, sociology and women's studies. So the sociology department asked me if I wanted to stay, and that, you know, they would make me real, like an assistant professor. And by then, I had already known that I didn't want to stay, and this is why. When I got to Oberlin in '92, that's when Rodney King was being beaten to death by police officers, and the whole world saw that. And I accidentally found the Black community in Oberlin, and it's just outside where the college is, and I went and mobilized the community, not single-handedly, but I was the only person from the university, and got a whole march going of 2,000 people. Well, they wanted to get rid of me after that at the university. But by then, I was on the market looking for a job someplace else. So I created havoc there, and then I went to the University of Michigan. Because first I went to Ann Arbor, and that was like a pressure cooker, which the University of Toronto was like. So I moved to Flint because I want to teach working class students. This is when you're naive, right? So I go to Flint, and I get involved with the unions there, the union work. And people are uncomfortable, and so are the students, because most of them are white, rural, working class students who think that I am too radical and the university needs to get rid of me. So they went to Ann Arbor, because Ann Arbor controls the whole university, and told them why they need to get rid of me. But it didn't work. I was there for 7 years. So, so that's the kind of community work that I did there. Let me tell you, I'm skipping out some things here. Anyway, after that, I went to Syracuse University in 2000. In 2000, I went to Syracuse University. They recruited me for African American studies. They've been trying to recruit me for like 3 or 4 years because they wanted a radical Black scholar, not feminist, okay, a radical Black scholar. So this radical Black feminist took the job after the 3 years trying to recruit me, and I went. I went as chair of the department. And I started working with community organizations immediately. And one was the Dunbar Center in Syracuse. By then, it was 80-something years old. And it was an organization that provided after-school education programs for Black students and Latino students at the time. And I developed this, the department already had internship programs, so I developed this one with the Dunbar. They provided after-school and food for the community on the weekends, for the poor community on the weekends. They asked me to join the board. I was part of the board. And I got many of those kids into Syracuse University and other schools. It was unheard of before. And when we had the Democratizing Knowledge project, we were really proud because part of the project we put together some institutes, and the first institute was at Syracuse University, Democratizing Knowledge project that Mayra mentioned we got funded by Mellon, and Chandra mentioned as well. And there we took the whole community of young scholars to the Dunbar. It was an eye-opening experience that they could see how we are connected to community in Syracuse. Then in 2010, I'm skipping a number of years here. In 2010, when the earthquake in Haiti happened, we went to, a group of 6 Black scholars went to the chancellor and said, we need to do something for Haiti. I had some legitimacy because I had worked in Haiti for years as with the United Nations UN AIDS. I left because of racism and how they used to talk about AIDS with Haitians, like Haitians started AIDS, and I wrote a scathing letter and I left the UN. I have since done some consulting for the UN since, but in a very different capacity. Anyway, because I had that experience, in 2010, when the earthquake happened, everybody wanted to help Haiti. And so everyone in the United States, all the organizations, everybody wants to help Haiti. But nobody can get anything off the ground. We went to the chancellor and I said we have to really go directly to the Haitian people and to the Haitian university, one public university in Haiti. And we need to go directly to them, not through any NGO or anything. And I'm saying all this to show you that the strategies around organizing are really important. If not, you could be organizing with yourself and in your head and with your group and nothing happens. So we went to Haiti directly with some of the administrators, with 3 administrators from SU, and by then only 2 professors were left in the group. The others got Haiti fatigue, I think, and had dropped out. So myself and a colleague from the law school, Paula Johnson, we were really solidly doing it forever. And so we went to Haiti, went to the University of Haiti, had discussions with them because they're involved in community work, and asked what they wanted to do. And they said, they were really clear. They said, we would like to rebuild Haiti in these 3 categories: in engineering, in social work, because people have suffered a lot of trauma and there's no help for them, and in business, so that we can get small businesses started again. And we came back and we had a progressive chancellor at SU, really progressive, and she funded it. She funded it. And we had it running to bring graduate students who had already finished their first degree in Haiti, to bring graduate students to Syracuse University so that they can get graduate degrees and return to Haiti. And we did that for 6 years until she left. And when she left, she encumbered 1 more year's money so that we could continue. And we brought 2 more social workers and people in health. And so altogether, it was like 17 graduates. So this is a little bit of the history of how I came to the academy. Activists outside and inside as well. So now we're going to read you a bit of some of how we got the FFW project going. FFW roots, its roots is in a scholarly chapter entitled Mapping Transnational Feminist Movements, Neoliberalism and the Politics of Solidarity by Chandra and I for the Oxford Handbook of Transnational Feminist Movements. is an anti-racist, anti-capitalist feminist from the global south, now living in the USA, and committed to the politics of solidarity and radical anti-racist feminist knowledge production. We embarked on this ambitious project. I read very well, but the lighting is kind of poor here, and the print is very small. Talking with key feminist scholar activists with decades of political intellectual involvement in feminist movements and knowledge production. We interviewed 33 feminist scholar activists, all colleagues and friends. I wrote this in. Oh, I saw it after. And so we interviewed them. Thank you. Appreciate that. So we interviewed them, but Chandra's going to mention that later. So in feminist movements and knowledge production, while we knew this could only be a particular and partial story, we were interested in generative dialogue and wanted to map a critical feminist geography of knowledge production, organizing, and solidarity building across multiple layers of difference in the current neoliberal, carceral, authoritarian context. Some of the themes and dilemmas that emerged in our survey of a small number of people, the number I just told you before, we underscored the importance and difficulties of transnational feminist praxis in the context of neoliberalism, the politics of difference, and the coloniality of North-South divides, and finally, the radical necessity of building solidarities across multiple borders. There's a vast literature on feminist movements and on feminist knowledge production in different sites. However, we were especially interested in how our respondents crafted and reflected on feminist realities of the ground, basically mapping how feminist knowledge production over the last few decades is connected to and manifested in the place-based lived realities of feminist praxis. The FFW project is in fact emerged from this specific commitment to a collaborative mapping of epistemologies and practices of place-based feminist engagement. These engagements have put our respondents on the front lines, creating knowledge with and about women, queer, and gender non-conforming communities who have lived through the ravages of globalization, that long, never-ending assault on the poor globally, and women in particular in the global north and south. In its previous iterations in the 20th century, globalization was seen as modernization, development, and economic growth. Today, we talk of neoliberalism and authoritarianism, and now neo-fascism. Like our participants in this project, we are absolutely clear that whatever banner it goes under, globalization is a continuation of the neo-imperialist project of finance capital that has been particularly harmful to most women in the world. In the North, it manifests as the open market warfare that sees the state making cuts in basic social welfare programs for the poor and disenfranchised in areas of healthcare, education, housing, etc. While in the South, its greatest impact has been its structural adjustment programs that have been imposed on poor countries and have wreaked havoc on the lives of the majority. We wanted to get a sense of how this materialized as feminist praxis for the participants in this project, who are academics but have all done activist work of this sort.
So as Linda said, we surveyed 33 feminist scholar activists from Asia, South America, the Caribbean, North Africa, Europe, and North America. Most of our respondents have histories of organizing and scholarship that date back to the 1970s, and each and every one continues to be committed to the urgencies of feminist politics in the contemporary context of neoliberalism, authoritarianism, and the increasing impoverishment and violence against women around the globe, right? we are going to show you a little bit of our site a little bit later, so you'll see the range of people that we spoke with and then most of whom we interviewed. Our respondents include women in their 80s, their 70s, 60s, 50s, and 40s, and actually younger now as well. And like the two of us, many of our respondents are anti-capitalist, anti-racist feminists with a history of organizing across racial, sexual, national, and religious divides. So what we did in the essay that came out of it, which was actually the genesis of the video project, we honored the voices, theorizations, and multiple genealogies of our feminist interlocutors, constructing a dialogue that foregrounds the similarities and the differences in our collective thinking and praxis as it has evolved over the decades. So we were interested in a collective mapping rather than a comprehensive review of feminist genealogies, so we could understand how far feminists have come in creating a better world for themselves in this phase of capitalism, and so that we can get a sense of what feminists across the globe are thinking about the challenges we face at this historical juncture. So just, so this point about methodology is important. What we did not want to do is to have a voiceover, that is our own theorization based on just little clips from different people to provide a narrative, right? So we wanted the voices of the women we spoke to stand for themselves and for itself, and then we wanted to be able to present a mapping that in fact makes you understand that while people are waging struggle in different geographical places, some of the ways we all think about the analysis around capitalism, racism, coloniality, misogyny, heterosexism, they actually intersect. And when you read this, when you even look at the video project, this is what we really want people to get from it, right? That there are ways in which we can focus on our common differences, that people talk about their specific histories, genealogies, geopolitical struggles and spaces, but when you hear multiple voices, in one space, you can see the interconnections, and you can figure this out for yourself without somebody being an omniscient narrator for this, right? So the project, the Feminist Freedom Warriors Video Archive, emerged from this work that we did, this pretty academic piece of writing that we did, right? We realized that academic and scholarly essays are not accessible to the feminist communities in the global south that we work with and are committed to, right? And so after a documentary video workshop with some colleagues, if anyone is interested in learning this, how to do this kind of documentary work, there are two fabulous feminists who teach. They're part of something called Quad Productions. We can give you contact information. And that's where we learned that we can do this work with next to no cost, okay? And remember, we are academics, writers, and organizers. So we knew next to nothing about doing video work, about any technology stuff that we needed to do, nothing. And so the fact that we learned that you can actually do this kind of work with almost no funding, right, made us imagine what we could do. So in 2015, we began a series of video dialogues with key feminist activists, and that is what led to creating a video archive that we think provides a counter-narrative to hegemonic nationalist, heteropatriarchal, and racialized state narratives, right? The aim of FFW, or the Feminist Freedom Warriors Archive, is to document and archive feminist activist stories that are yet to be told. It is a unique history of feminist knowledge production and activism, addressing economic, anti-racist, social justice, and anti-capitalist issues across national borders. So, you know, FFW, the archive we've created, we think is pretty unique. Why? Because when you look and look for other feminist archives, there are quite a few, but they don't do exactly what we are trying to do, right? So there is a Latin American feminist video archive housed at the University of Florida and the University of London. There are feminist archives. There's something called the Feminist Archives Feminist Future, which is housed at the University of Leeds, that has some work on US and United Kingdom. There's the Black Feminist Archives, which are a collection of multiple smaller archives, right, which are also important and interesting. But I'm saying this as a way of saying, of course, there is a genealogy of people doing this kind of feminist archival work, right? But the way we framed what we are doing and the way we have decided that these were to be kitchen table conversations, which were really extensive conversations. They are not edited in terms of, you know, the story we want to tell. It's exactly what the conversation was, right? That's important. Now, this is why are archives important, right? Why are counter archives important? Traditional archives, like, for instance, the museum is an archive, right? But they are what somebody has called petrification machines, right? They collect and encode and store what they see as objective documents and data that is deemed valuable by the state or the agency that is doing the archival system, right? All forms of classification of this kind follow a particular logic. And you always have to ask, who is determining what the logic is and what the classification is? This is a question that I have a student who's working on the Dewey Decimal System, right? Which is a really interesting system to analyze in terms of colonial legacies, okay? And exactly how those classifications direct knowledge production and research that can be done. So it's important then to understand what traditional archives do and what we are trying to do, right? So archives store and include, right? But they also testify to narratives of exclusion, okay? In the same way as they store and include, they also exclude. So counter-hegemonic archives then are concerned with memory, but also with the idea of the future and of imagination. And those are not that easy to encode, yeah? You have to think through what that really means. Yeah, okay, you. Sorry, we're trying to do this so that,
So
yes.
in this counter-hegemonic archive, we want to document and create an open access video archive of the scholar activist stories of our sister feminists from different generations, as we have both said already. One of the reasons we came up with why we need to do this is because we still do much work in the global south, and we know that in countries where there's serious poverty, like still many parts of Africa and Asia and so on, people do not have money to buy books. And even though much teaching now is done through online and students access all kinds of things through social media, we believe that the written book is still important. They don't have money to get to it. So this is a way of compressing some of what is necessary and in those books through this archive. And that's part of what makes this archive unique. So while there are a few documentaries on individual feminists, unlike what we are doing, individual feminists like Charlotte Bunch and Angela Davis, none of those documentaries focus on our collective transnational feminist praxis. We believe there are stories and lessons learned that have yet to be written into the history of social movements, which are still largely Eurocentric and individualist, and in radical social thought. Feminist Freedom Warriors seeks to document this collective history and make it available online for pedagogical and organizing purposes. And we have become aware of how widely used this archive is and how many professors and non-professors and activists and social change agents are using this. People in collectives all over, they have been contacting us, telling us, and we are still in the process of getting somebody to map all of it so that we can put it in one place. Grassroots organizations, NGOs, educational institutions, and popular education centers, etc. Feedback indicates, the feedback we've had so far, indicates the value of these intimate kitchen table conversations about our multiple and collective feminist journeys and their relevance to audiences for multiple purposes, even beyond our imagination of how it could be used, that it's being used now. Feminist Freedom Warriors, the book came out in 2018, and it came out through of these archive early conversations, the earliest ones are what's in the book, through Haymarket Publication. And it reaches many left, scholarly, progressive, activist communities in the US. Also written up in, it was also written up in the Time magazine and online venues like Truth Out and C-SPAN, to our surprise.
Gustavo, I think we need to pull up the site now. So what we want to do now is just kind of slowly scroll through, and you'll see who we have on the site. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but we might stop and say a couple words about people.
Gustavo wasn't there.
I know, I saw Gustavo.
Boy, it's cold in here.
You all have 85 degrees weather and you make it so cold in here. Seriously. Okay, that. Can you
Play it.
Can you scroll? Okay. So these two are the two women who do quad productions, who taught us
how
documentary.
Taught us how to do it and how you can do it practically cheaply.
Yep. So I'll just give you a sense. I mean, we have people from different parts of the world. We have indigenous, Latinx, Arab American. We have Barbara Smith, who most people know, Gloria Wecker from the Netherlands, Diana Molinari from Argentina, who's now in Sweden, Shari Moraga, Fabiana Rodriguez, who's a fabulous Peruvian artist, Kim Tolbear, an indigenous feminist scientist, Alok Ved Menon, who's getting very well known, Aida, Angela, Himani, Beverly Guy Sheftal, Linda Alcoff, Mara Riveros, Barbara Ransby, and Amina Mama. Okay? So
There are many others coming that we have already interviewed and so on, but they will be added to the site.
yes. So
Including Myra.
yes,
Who
we
will
just
be
did Myra.
We just
and
did Myra today.
we have Elizabeth Crespo and Ana Irma
Yeah.
Rivera Lassen also, and we're doing more. So really, so I think, should we go straight to the short video? Okay. Yeah? Okay, so we're going to wrap up because we think that, it'll be better if we have a conversation than us reading anymore. So we have a 5-minute video a clip from a number of these conversations that is on anti-capitalist feminist thought that we want to show. So can you, Gustavo, can you do the short one, the link? please. And just quickly, the people here are Gloria Joseph. Let me just see. Many of these people you will recognize. Gloria Joseph was an activist, author, professor of Africana Studies at Hampshire College. Angela Davis, who I don't need to introduce, but is a longtime revolutionary. Amina Mama, who's a British-Nigerian scholar activist, who is now the Kwame Nkrumah Chair in Social Sciences in the University of Legon, Ghana. There's Minnie Bruce Pratt, who's a poet activist and also an LGBTQ activist and an activist for workers' rights. There's Zila Eisenstein, who's a political theorist and has written a lot of socialist feminist theory that I think is classic. Aida Hernandez Castillo, who you saw, who's an anthropologist, feminist anthropologist, teaches at CIESAS in Mexico and has done work in Chiapas and with indigenous feminists in Guatemala. And there's Margot, finally, Margot Cazavare, who's an activist, educator, and prison, and works on militarism, on armed conflict, and violence against women. Okay? Come on. I hope they check that out before.
So you will hear them talk about their work.
But very quick. It's literally 5 minutes.
Yeah.
People still think that capitalism is democracy. You know, when you got those kind of thoughts, and people don't even realize, you know, I mean, what someone has to be exploited for the people to make something, you know. So, and then, you can't, you know, it can't be single issue politics. Single issue
That's
politics
right.
never gotten anywhere.
That's right.
So you've got to approach it from the angle, a multiplicity of angles.
Today, when people refer to intersectionality as if that category had always been around,
Right.
it's been so completely naturalized now that they don't take into consideration that much of the impetus for developing a framework that was capable of addressing these issues together came directly from people, women especially, working on the ground, doing activism against war, activism within the labor movement, activism against, for example, sterilization abuse.
And why do we make organizations? We make them to do more than what we ourselves can do as individuals.
Right.
So I think it's only collective action that really can make change, one. And in terms of what we've been able to do, I think we have always confronted one particular major challenge that comes from living in an unjust and unequal system. And that's our movements have those challenges within them because we people are formed in those environments.
Right.
And so within movements is where we have to change ourselves as well as achieve things for women.
The real struggle is for consciousness,
Yeah.
but as that is given to us out of the material moment,
Right.
how to claim it and hold on to it with each other. Now I think that a new kind of family is only going to come about as part of an anti-capitalist struggle, and that only then will it really truly be, love makes a family, families by choice, because everything that is weighted down on the family now, that is forced upon the family, survival, the buffer against utter destitution, that would be lifted from the family.
Yeah.
And then it would be a whole different life for women.
And then also, what is the responsibility of white women within the different women's movements? Because we don't have a unified one. what really is our role in trying to negotiate an honest coalition that, for me, asks more than for me to be an ally. You know, for me to be an active participant in the struggle. You know.
And I feel that another challenge now is that I feel that with many of these decolonial critiques to ourselves as intellectuals, one issue is that my truth as a feminist of what is emancipation and what is justice is not necessarily what they imagine or they want. So to arrive to the space of encounter open to a dialogue in which I am willing to destabilize my certainties is not as powerful as arriving with the truth.
Of course.
It's a lot easier to get there with the truth than to get there and say, well, I just want to see what can we build.
It seems to me that we really need to figure out the relationship between the two, right? The separation and the togetherness. And, you know, something I really have come to recognize from all my travels and being in very different places is that there's no connection without freedom, and there's no freedom without connection. Right.
Thank you.
So that's brief, it's quick, and it's a snippet of the archive. And we are expanding it. It's going to be ongoing. We're expanding it, and we should tell you, because this is really important, that we have not gotten any funding to do this project. This project, we get little bits and pieces of support from research accounts, for research accounts. So you get an assistantship to work on your classes that you're teaching, and you use the assistantship to help put the archive together. Okay.
And part of the reason is that we've been very clear that we do not want our institution to have dibs on this, to have any copyright on what we're doing.
That's why
And
it says
so,
.org,
absolutely
.edu.
outside
Yeah.
the institution. Yep.
Completely outside. So we plan to expand it.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we plan to expand it, working on multiple thematic videos, now focusing on particular themes. On cross-generational, Black feminists, Latinx, indigenous feminists, and feminist praxis. So this was a general kind of introduction of, you know, people doing this work. Now we're going to focus on segments of more
Thematic.
intense, thematic segments and more intense look at this. We're going to give you maybe quotes, a couple quotes, and so the first one I have here is from Angela Davis. She says, the value of feminism, or the value of anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist feminisms that are Marxist-inflected feminisms, is that it allows us to think about the framework of our analysis or of the organizing at the same time as we are, that framework to think about whatever it is we are examining. Yeah. That is a habit that most people have not been able to embrace, because it is a habit that contravenes disciplinary thinking. In disciplinary thinking, the framework is what enables everything else. So once you begin challenging that framework, and many of us in the academy are trained in these frameworks, that's the point she's making. So this is a challenge to that. Challenging the framework, everything falls apart. And feminism allows us to trouble the framework, to allow things to fall apart, and at the same time, put them back together. It allows us to imagine something entirely different. The frameworks that we are trained in don't allow us to move outside the rubric of the framework. And
you all know this because you're part of an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary congress, right? Because part of what those borders and crossing borders allows us is to ask questions that particular disciplines, in fact, police, and draw very clear lines around. Oh, you're a historian, you can do this in history. You're a sociologist, you can do that in sociology. And oftentimes, the questions we need to ask to produce the knowledges that we really need, especially knowledges we need to think about and organize around social and economic justice, are not available by
In those disciplines.
just following those disciplinary paradigms. So we're going to end, and I'm just going to read a quote from another favorite author of ours who we quote in the book as well, and this is Sarah Ahmed. Sarah says, "Feminism is at stake in how we generate knowledge, in how we write, who we cite. I think of feminism as a building project. If our texts are worlds, they need to be made out of feminist materials. Feminist theory is world making. This is why we need to resist positioning feminist theory as simply or only a tool, in the sense of something that can be used in theory and only then to be put down or put away. It should not be possible to do feminist theory without being a feminist, which requires an active, ongoing commitment to live one's life in a feminist way." Okay, this is from Sarah Ahmed's Living a Feminist Life. So I think we will end here and just open it up, and happy to have a discussion, take questions, anything. Thank you for listening.
Hi, esto se oye, ¿verdad? Gracias por estar aquí. ¿Alguna persona que quiera hacer alguna pregunta, que se quiera acercar? Yo sé que Nilsa y yo sé que Liliana estaban locas por hablar con Chandra y con Linda. There are two scholars and incredible activists that have been working with communities and all the way to the UN, and that they're here and they wanted to tell you something. Así que, por favor.
First of all, good afternoon. I want to congratulate you both for your work, for your really commitment to all the issues that you are dealing with. And particularly, I wanted to get in contact with you, Anita, especially because I dealt with a program, a university program in relation to Haiti. I coordinated with a group of people link between the University of Puerto Rico and the University of Haiti at a time when it was not very usual to have this type of relationship. It was mainly with private universities, and we stressed very much the fact that we wanted to really be able to share, not to give, but to share information, knowledge, commitments with the people from Haiti. From the professors from Haiti. And we also had the experience of bringing students to do graduate studies at the Natural Sciences faculty and Social Sciences faculty. So I think we have a lot to share, because we need to go back to Haiti, especially because of the moments that we're living, the situation, the terrible critical situation that we're having in Haiti. And that's why I mentioned to Mayra that I think we may be able to do something together, no? And build up from the blocks that we already had at that time, from the all the information and all the commitment and all the friends that we made in Haiti. So I urge you to please be able to share with me some of your information, and I would be willing also to share mine. Thank you so much, and it's really fantastic, all that we have heard, and not only in relation to Haiti, but all the feminist work and all the possibilities of doing documentaries at, as you say, at low cost, but with the commitment and the help of many people and organizations. I think we can do a lot. And I think that documentaries are really a great opportunity to put into images, the words, the experiences. As you were talking, I think we all feminists should, in a way, be able to do like a video of our experiences. That's what I thought when you were talking about. I'll do that because I think that some of the experiences, that the good ones, the difficult ones, you know, all the hurt, especially now that we're having all this laws against abortion, and we have had people who have had that experience and who need to help other generations not to lose rights. So we are at a time when all human rights are on skates, so we need to really work that, and especially work it in some instances from a personal experience and views. I think that has gives us the possibility of really having a real contact with women, with especially young women. Another thing that I wanted to share now that we're here, that I have a very good friend who was a very important person in terms of reproductive rights in Puerto Rico. She's now with the mental sickness for now more than 10 years. I think her life should be well known. Betita, Isabel Lavoy. She was she was married to a Haitian person, so she was very much in contact with Haiti too. And her experience and all that she was able to work at that time, I worked with her. This was in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. And now, I mean, if she were able to see how much we have, women, especially young women, have been able to benefit with all the work that is being done by the feminist movement. And she was really a pioneer in that in Puerto Rico. And maybe not too many people know about her life. And I would really like to gather information and make some type of document or books that will really enhance, not only know her, but enhance the work that she did at the time. It was so difficult to get young women to be active in this movement 20, 25 years ago. Very different from now.
Yeah.
And what is the main difference? The continuous work and commitment of many women for that. So I thank you very much for being here and giving us the opportunity to share your information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, this is the importance of archives, right? I mean, and archives that create a counter history, that make visible the kinds of struggles that have been made invisible in hegemonic archives or in the sort of traditional ways that knowledge is codified and disciplined, actually, in many of our intellectual and academic spaces. Thank you.
And the way we're trained in the disciplines, right? If you have something counter-hegemonic to say about sociology, and you come from some literary discipline, literature somewhere, you do not have the right because you're not trained as a sociologist. I mean, that constrains people's very thinking, right? You do not have the right. You have no legitimacy. Well, here we are as transdisciplinary scholars.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for your presentation. Well, my question was very simple and pragmatic. I was telling Mayra, where can we get in touch with the, I know there's a book, but there's a site also. And I was asking her, listen, Mayra, do I have to go to you to get to them?
No, no. It's feministfreedomwarriors.org.
.org. Okay.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that I'm a sociologist of social movements, and one of the things that I am very sad about is that my university had never developed an area, a program, a line of study or something about social movements, either feminist, urban, or anything. And lately, I decided, as a retired, in Spanish we don't say retired, like we say jubilados.
Which is?
Because retired means that you're in your house watching TV and looking at your navel, and that is something that we, the retired people from Puerto Rico, we don't do. So as a jubilada, I was suggesting that even though it doesn't exist, but I think that now it may be able to exist, an area, due to this program, an area where students, even though there is no official department area of program, where students can go to study and participate in movements, in social movements, practical social movements, and work with that for the process that I call movement, creativity, research, and then change, because you produce knowledge. So this is some sort of archive
Yes.
that can help that. And if there is a connection, an institutional connection with the university from which I was retired or jubilada,
Right.
I think there is a possibility of making certain advances, like suggesting to students to start these connections between movements, movements, for services or for women or for Afro-descendants. So
Yeah.
in that sense, I was asking Mayra if we had a direct access, because
Yeah.
then one can start ideas through that
Yes.
and create institutional channels that don't exist, but one can create.
Yeah, actually we use, of course you have access, but also each of us have used, and people we hear from everywhere have used this archive as assignments in their classes.
That's it.
So for instance, one of the things I do in an introductory class is to ask students to watch 2 sets of conversations. Each conversation is at the most an hour on this, okay? So it's not a whole long thing. You can watch it. And I think that, younger generations are very literate in this way. And,
yes.
are likely to watch. So they will watch, you just watch 4 of them, so 2 and 2, and then do a comparative analysis of what is each person saying. How do they talk about questions of feminism, about social and economic justice, about the geographical and political space that each occupies, about neoliberalism. So you can give them questions. That's why it's pedagogically so useful, and a lot of people have told us stories. And if and when we have resources,
We'll put the stories
we're going
together.
to do we're going to add, curriculum, assignments and stories over there, which would be useful, I think.
And it has the flexibility that also with another area of this type of situation is what Nilsa says, the knowledge of the history of previous generations that did other things. Some are forgotten, some made mistakes, and it's an interesting way of like talking to
Exactly.
people that are not at the university anymore, but they can exchange ideas,
Exactly.
in terms of what did we do and what did we do differently.
And that's how we started. We started because we saw a number of our colleagues may or may not be around. you know.
Exactly.
And actually, the first person you saw, Gloria Joseph, passed away. What,
Oh,
2-3
yeah.
years ago? You know, so it was very important to us to document these stories. And all of them are people that we see as activists and as knowledge producers. So it's not just one or the other. Everyone is
yes.
actually
And it's
producing
important
knowledge.
also for the younger generation, so that they understand that what they are doing now did not start with them.
Exactly.
It was, you know, there's the generations before them, which will inspire them even further, that this existed before in different forms.
Exactly.
And good for you that you are carrying it on as younger
And
generations.
it is not an antagonistic situation. On the other hand, it is a situation where, you know, like Pablo Freire used to say, I don't know if I can
Yeah,
translate it, he
yes.
said, do not imitate me,
Yes.
surpass me. And then
Exactly,
if you go with that attitude to young people, but in order to surpass me, you have to know me. So there is the issue of knowledge and then of being able to surpass me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You know, thank you. The archives, these kind of archives are really extraordinary. It's one of the one important way in the Caribbean where knowledge, the production of knowledge, activism is linked also with creative work. Very much in the Caribbean, you know, dance, theater. You know, in Puerto Rico now, I receive in the internet, you know, every day about 10 activities of bomba. you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
which was where women are the the protagonists, which were not like that 10 years ago. But what I was going to ask you, if you have relations with a person based on Jamaica, well, she was based on Jamaica, but it's now, I think it's in Canada now, Honor Ford Smith.
Yes, we know
which
her
have,
very well.
We know
We
Honor,
know
yes.
Honor, yeah.
have this group called Sistering,
Yes,
which was
yes.
theater.
Yes.
Yes.
Activist theater.
Activist theater,
Yeah.
Woman activist
Yes.
theater.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is yes, that you
Yes.
know, but I met her in Puerto Rico at an activity, which I think is very important for you to know the existence of that activity. Well, Maria del Carmen is here, and she was participating there. It was late. It was in the 70s, I think. Early 80s. Well, 1980, there was a seminar in Puerto Rico called Women and Social Development, something like that. Social production. Well, it was a real seminar on feminist issues with very interdisciplinary. It was organized with the Sussex, with the Institute of Development Studies in Sussex, and with Centro de Estudios de la Realidad Puertorriqueña, CEREP, in Puerto Rico. It was but it was done in Puerto Rico, not in England. It was done in Puerto Rico, and we had about 20 persons from all the Caribbean. And Honor Ford Smith was one of the participants. And I think it's very important to know, because most of these activities were though very good, very well intentioned, but first were based. And this was in the Caribbean, with people from the Caribbean, with relation with an organization in England, it's true. But she was sort of a participant, but the main participant were from the Caribbean.
Sure.
And it's, at that time, well, there was not the same kind of activities, you know. So a book came out, but there was not so much, you know, internet or videos on this kind of thing. It was early 80s. Well, 1980, you said it. No, but it's important. I bring this to you because it's a very important historical thing based on Puerto Rico, and since you are in Puerto Rico, and it's even forgotten in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
That
it shows you the importance of documenting,
yes,
right? All
yes,
of
of
these
course,
things.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's very important for, you know, to have Honor, for example, speak not only of sistering, but of her experience in Puerto Rico in that, and to interview Maria del Carmen or Marcia Rivera, which was really the leader of that activity. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a list of people that we're still trying to get, and
Honor is on it.
on that list.
And don't worry, we're working on this. Bigger archive.
But I do remember that conference and some of what came out of it. That was really, really important to see.
Te presentas primero. Gracias.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
So my name is Yorani Foniera. I'm a journalism student, and I wanted to ask if my voice shakes. It's because it's so cold in here.
Yeah.
Since
Our voices too. It's so cold in here.
Since the project was not founded by any institution, and throughout your work as an academic and activist, you had to learn of strategies around organizing without those fundings. I wanted to ask for the benefit of those who may consider to embark on a similar project that preserves our stories as Caribbeans. Could you expand a little bit more on those strategies you learned throughout?
Expound on the strategies we used to get this going?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Like we said, we recognized some of the privileges, that we've had. Like the two professors who are filmmakers are friends of ours. And so we brought them to Syracuse University to do a workshop on filmmaking. Documentary. And we did not know that this would emerge. But they, in working with us that weekend, it was on a weekend they came, working with us that weekend, they said, I want it to the entire class, maybe 15, 20 people, I want you to create a proposal that you will write in for money someplace to do some kind of documentary film that you're interested in. And we put together a proposal for.
And they workshopped, 15 people gave us feedback about everything that was wrong.
Yeah.
and also that
But
it was
one
good.
thing that was right and important, that in our proposal we asked for $200,000.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was right, because they told us you always ask
For a lot of money.
more.
No, we
money.
didn't get any of it. But
Yeah,
that's
this was just a proposal with them, teaching us about it, and that's the one thing they said we did right. If you ever apply for funding, always apply for much
more.
because there's no place to go in negotiations but down. But you can't go up.
Exactly.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Yeah. But also,
That's just one strategy. There
Yeah.
were so many other things that
Right.
we used. And part of it was all the community work we've done, came full force into bringing this into being.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to go and learn certain things and read a whole bunch of literature.